This is the Next Bite of Life podcast, the place to be to hear personal stories from expats, digital nomads, and everybody else taking their next bite of life. Thanks everyone for joining me on this episode of the Next Bite of Life podcast. My name is Kemkem. I realize after so many episodes that I've never really done one on myself. So this podcast is going to be my story. And I assure you it's not a very exciting one, but it's mine just the same. The tagline of this show is Everybody Has a Story. I was born and raised in Nigeria, in West Africa, and I lived there for the first 11 years of my life, at which point I moved to Boston. Now, it wasn't really traumatic per se. It was more so that I was there with my older sisters and a brother, and my parents were still back in Nigeria. So it was kind of strange to be away from them um, while being so young. But, it was something that I learned to live with. It was very interesting moving from such a very crowded city to Boston, which was lily white and very cold. I remember I got there at the very end of summer, so I was in the fall weather and I thought it was going to stay like that, which, it was beautiful. But unfortunately, winter came and the first time seeing snow was really interesting. We lived on the 19th floor, I remember that much. And I was just fascinated by it and I just loved watching it from the top as the snow fell. Of course, it was terrible once it turned into slush and you were slipping all over the place from the icy, glassy snow. But I managed to persevere. And I lived in Boston until the age of 20 when I graduated college. Actually, I take that back. I was 24. And I had always fantasized about living in Los Angeles. I had traveled there during my holidays while I was in pharmacy school and eventually decided to move because I was just sick of the snow at this point and the cold. Los Angeles was fantastic and I lived there for 20 years. So that's where most of my living and liking and everything else came from. It was very interesting to be in Los Angeles as a single pharmacist. I was making good money and I had transferred out with my company because they were opening stores at that point on the West Coast. And they asked if anybody wanted to transfer. So it was very easy for me, at least as far as working. The harder part was, trying to have a social life, not knowing anybody. So it was very lonely in the beginning. And what I found out was Los Angeles is very materialistic, even more than any place else. It was very gotta be seen wearing the best clothes and having the best car. And you were always trying to keep up with the Joneses. And for someone like me who really didn't care that much about that, it was hard. But it became a lot easier once I started hanging out with other people who had moved from different parts of the country. I think in the whole 20 years, I only knew maybe 5 people who were actually born and bred in Los Angeles. Most people were from other states like Tennessee, Florida, uh, Philadelphia. I met a lot of people from Philadelphia, and we all kind of had the same values. So that was definitely much better after that. I made solid friends, and I had a lot of second and third families from Mexico, San Salvador, and Guatemala. So I had like 3 moms, really, and three dads. And they basically took care of me, especially when I couldn't go home for holidays. I spent a lot of time with those families eating tamales at Christmas and, you know, observing the Mexican holidays. And it was just fun. I've always loved traveling, and I try to do as much as possible all the while growing up. And I've been to quite a few countries. I don't bother to count like everybody else because it's more about the experience than anything else. I just like to go and see new places, do new things. And I'd always said to myself I wasn't going to get married and I wasn't going to have any kids because my interests were too. I love to read and I love to travel. And so being single, having all this disposable income, I was able to treat myself really well and made sure to go away whenever I could. And my favorite place in the world, one of my favorite places is London. So I went there quite a few times, hanging out with friends and eating. And, you know, I could do that for the rest of my life. And this is basically what I did. My parents were pretty traditional and they expected me to get married just like my other siblings after college. And so, you know, I was sort of a disappointment when when I didn't when I told them I didn't want to get married and I didn't want to have any kids. And my mom always said that she sent me away way too early and I should have stayed in Nigeria. Probably I would have grown up. I would have grown up to be the kind of person that was not somebody to be ashamed of, really, because the tradition and the culture says, you know, you're born, you get married, you go to school, you know, just in case you get disappointed. This was exactly how my mom put it. In case you get disappointed by a man, then you have school to fall back on. But basically, you were supposed to go to school, and after that, get married, instead having kids right away because children are considered like your ultimate achievement, I guess. You know, so it was something that everybody was supposed to do. And till today, a lot of my aunts and relatives still like, you know, when it comes to saying that I don't have any kids, they kind of lower the voice and the whisper, and like it's something that, oh my god, poor thing, she doesn't have any kids. But I never felt like that, and I'm just like, I don't care what you think, this is my life. I'm grateful that they weren't really like, oh my god, you're going to have to do it, sort of like the last person I had interviewed who had talked about, like, in the Indian culture, she was ostracized basically. But I was just ignored and they just kept hoping that I would come to my senses. So when I didn't, they ultimately gave up. My mother kept saying, well, find somebody from your own. It started as find somebody from your village, then it was find somebody from your city, then it was find somebody from the same tribe, and then it was find somebody from the same country. And I think by the end, if I had come home with, you know, um, an alien, she would have been okay with it because at least she could tell her friends she's not really she's not really alone. So I was sort of a disappointment to her in some ways. Now she was very proud of me that I was working and I was doing, you know, my own thing, but she wouldn't really say that out loud because it's just not expected. And my dad was just like, well, Miss America, what can we do? You know. So by the time I ended up getting married when I was 42, which to them was just like, what? But that time they had given up and it wasn't even a big deal at that point. It's like, yeah, whatever. So um, we, I met my husband at the age of 42 when we were both living in Los Angeles. He had recently moved from Rome, where he was born and raised, and actually was his second trip back to America. Before that, he had lived in North Carolina and then moved back to Rome and then moved back. to Los Angeles, where his brother was. And that's where we ended up meeting. And we got married very quickly, just a few months after meeting. And it was shortly after that that we moved to Houston because one of my sisters got sick and we were going to take care of her. Houston, we ended up living in Houston for 6 years. And to be honest, I was not a fan of the city. It was just too spread out. Everything looked the same. And after the excitement of Los Angeles, it was hard to adjust to that for me. But I worked a lot. Um, it was nice though because the houses were much bigger. You had more land compared to Los Angeles. But what I found really interesting was there was no state taxes in Texas. So our property tax was three times as much as we were paying in Los Angeles because of that. Because they get you with the property taxes. The houses were a lot cheaper. We end up paying, the same kind of square footage, maybe a little more. We were paying one third. We paid one third the price of the house compared to Los Angeles, but we were paying three times the property taxes. So it kind of almost evened out, really. After my sister passed away, that's when we started thinking about moving away from the US as a whole because he liked to travel and so did I. And we wanted to travel things that we had talked about, my childhood dreams of always traveling surfaced again. But you're so used to life in the US where you go to work every day, you come back, you order in, and you constantly are buying stuff and you don't enjoy the life. And I was tired of that after almost 30 years of working as a pharmacist. So I wanted something a lot easier. I wanted a better way of life. And at that point, Houston had held, you know, bitter memories for me. I was sad all the time. And I wanted to just leave, just get away from there. So, we came up with a plan. Well, he did mostly. I just wanted to leave, period. And I would have gone right away if it hadn't been for his sensibility. Truth be told, I think it always helps to have two people who think differently, like complement each other. I was much more of a spender and fly by the seat of my pants kind of person, whereas he thinks things out and he'll chew on it as far as like financial things. Because of his family history, he was a lot more careful when it came to money. So when we came up with the idea of leaving, I was just like, oh, let's go. And he's like, no, we can't really go because we owe all this credit card debt. We have all this mortgages. We need to figure out a plan and save up enough money because we don't want to make this a failure when we go. If we go, we're going to do it the right way. We need to save up this much money, I figured, which will last us into retirement when we can start drawing from our 401k. We need to, get rid of some property that were like at this point, they were making money, but overall they weren't really serving their purpose, which was to, you know, have a lot of money left over after taking care of everything. But it took us about 3.5 years to do that and save up enough money that we felt we were okay to go and get rid of some properties that were weighing us down so we had the cash to live on. So once we had all our ducks in a row, as I like to put it, we then said about leaving America. And we left in 2013. And our first country was Malta, and I really like the country as a whole. It's not very big. It's only about 22 square miles, so it's a very small place. And it's one of the tiniest countries in Europe, but they were part of the EU. And doing my research, I wanted someplace really close to his mom in Rome so we could pop in, but he didn't want to move back to Italy. And I wanted an English speaking country. So it served both purposes, and the cost of living was really cheap. So that was our first place after we left the US. And we ended up living there for about a year and a half. And it was great while it lasted. But unfortunately, we got cabin fever, which everybody had warned us against, but we didn't really think it would happen to us. I think Malta is a great place if you're retired, at the regular traditional age, like 62, 67, something like that. But if you're young and you have a lot of years left, hopefully, it's kind of you get that island fever. You feel like you've done everything, seen everything, and we wanted to move on. And so our next place was, okay, where in Europe are we going to go to? And I chose Malaga, um, by accident, really. Basically, I just threw a pen at the map of Europe, and I landed on Malaga. And I keep telling my friends, had it landed in some place that I didn't like, Russia or some really cold place, I probably would have thrown the pencil as many times as possible to get one of the warmer climates. But it landed in Malaga first try, so that was it. Without having visited, we just moved there. Gotta had our stuff shipped over there, and it turned out that we really didn't like Malaga for a lot of reasons. The beach was okay, but we found that it was really hard for me, especially not speaking any Spanish, to understand the Andalusian accent, especially from Malaga. And they skip a lot of letters, and I found it really hard. And I thought I knew just a little bit of like Mexican Spanish to get me through, but it was nothing. Even after 7 months, I couldn't understand anything. And we had trouble finding an apartment that would let us in with dogs. So that was something else that I hated. The center was where we wanted to live, but we ended up being, outside of the center in a not so nice neighborhood because it was the only place we could find that would, rent to us. It was one apartment, which was nice inside, but the barrio itself was not to my liking. So I think I got really depressed from that, and he didn't like it much either. A few months later, we went to visit a friend who was living in Seville. And after seeing the city, we were just in love. We spent 3 days there, and it was so much fun that we came back to Malaga and, you know, cut our lease short and left and moved to Seville. And we liked it really. We loved it. But unfortunately, we had been warned that Seville gets really hot. And we thought, you know what? We're from Houston. It couldn't be that bad. And the first year actually was very nice. It was a dry heat. It was great. It was hot, but it wasn't as hot as I thought it would be. So I'm like, what are people complaining about? We could dip in the pool. But by the second year, whew, it was horrible. Absolutely horrible. And the heat just did us in, and we're like, we just can't take it anymore. So I said that it's the last summer I was going to spend in Seville. So we were looking for another place to move to inside of Spain because we liked Spain as a whole. And Valencia actually came on our radar because it was close to the water. It was a city, it was the third biggest city in Spain. We had tried to move to Barcelona, not tried, we went for like a 3 week um, expedition, trying to see if we could if we would like it there and move there. But we ended up not liking it. Well, I liked it, but he didn't like it. Said it was too big, too, touristy, too everything. So we also tried Madrid, and we really both love Madrid, and we would have loved to live there. But what we found was, first, it was not close to the water, and second of all, um, we couldn't afford to live in the center, which is what we had wanted. And by the time we found a place that was affordable, it was so far out, like close to the airport, that it just didn't make any sense. So we were like, well, why would we leave Seville for this? And Valencia kind of came up, even though we hadn't been there. But in researching places close to the water, we thought, let's go try it. So we took the train up to Valencia, and we both liked it. And that's how we end up in the city. And now we've been here for a while, and it gets better and better. The cost of living in Valencia is a lot cheaper than Madrid and a lot cheaper than Barcelona. And the people are friendly. And so far, it's been absolutely wonderful. And this is where we decide to stake our claim and stay. We have been to so many different countries trying to decide if it would be better. In addition to those cities, we went to Budapest for a few weeks trying it out. We went to Prague, we went to Berlin, we went to God, at least 10 other places, but we kept finding for some reason or the other it didn't agree with us. And we always kept coming back to Spain and Valencia in particular. So this is where we're at, and this is where we plan on staying. And so far, we haven't regretted that choice. So that's the story in a nutshell. I will be, oh, I wanted to ask you if you're enjoying the series of podcasts that you're listening to. We would so much appreciate reviews and having you subscribe to the show so that you don't miss any episodes. And if you have any questions or any comments, be sure and contact us. You can get in touch with us through our website, which is nextbiteoflife.com, just like this podcast name. You can also find some of our videos on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, a new YouTube channel called Next Bite of Life. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, which is a little introduction to me and my story after telling you so many stories. In the future, I will be bringing you more podcasts about life in Valencia and life in Spain and some of our travels in general. So hopefully you'll stay tuned for that. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Next Bite of Life podcast. Bye.